My boyfriend was on a trip for 10 days, and when he returned and we were being affectionate, he suddenly said, "I never noticed before, but you're quite fair." After he fell asleep, I opened his phone's photo album. Inside were hundreds of photos of him with other women taken over the past 10 days. That woman had a wheat-colored complexion, not as fair as mine. I quietly put the phone back and said nothing. In fact, my new goal outside isn't any better than his. I don't dare to speak, I'm afraid that if I do, I'll expose myself. While I was resting, Colin reached into my pajamas and suddenly raised an eyebrow. "Sister, I never noticed before, but you're quite fair." I was taken aback, a faint thought flickering in my mind, but it was quickly interrupted by his actions. As I bit my lip, I drowsily thought, a younger brother is just a younger brother, his energy seems like it will never run out. After he fell asleep, I don't know why I lost my drowsiness and got up, putting on my clothes. Today, Colin said something very interesting. After traveling for 10 days, I suddenly realized I am very pale. Who isn't pale? I quietly took his phone, unlocked it with his birthday, and opened the photo album. I don't know if he didn't have time to delete them or thought I wouldn't look at his phone, but recently, hundreds of photos with other girls appeared right in front of me. In front of the pyramid, amidst the yellow wind and sand, he embraced the girl dressed in a wasteland style with a shawl, smiling to reveal a set of white teeth. The girl looked young, probably just in her early 20s. She wasn't particularly beautiful, but she was pleasant to the eye. Long hair dyed golden, a round face with big eyes, shining with the unique brilliance of youth when smiling. Flipping further back, the photos gradually became unbearable to look at. In front of the huge floor-to-ceiling windows by the hotel pool, and on the enormous double bed, their bodies were very intimate, and the girl seemed not to mind at all that he was taking pictures. The young man was truly bold in his approach. The most important thing is that the girl has wheat-colored skin. I understand now why Colin said I was pale. After being with her for a full 10 days, coming back to see me, he must have thought I looked pale. I quietly placed the phone back by his pillow and glanced at Colin. His brow was relaxed, and he was sleeping soundly, his handsome forehead casting deep shadows in the moonlight, with long eyelashes. Youth is great, I can just fall asleep. I reached out and gently touched his eyelid, and his eyelashes fluttered, but he didn't wake up. I first met Colin when I went to visit my cousin at her university. There were many girls gathered around the playground, and I curiously squeezed in to hear the sound of a guitar inside. The evening breeze brushed against the black hair on the young man's forehead, his long fingers strumming the guitar, the setting sun outlining the solid yet unpretentious lines of muscle on his back, his thin eyelids tinged with a faint pink. He had long eyelashes that drooped slightly, singing a foreign song, his voice carrying a faintly hoarse magnetism. I tried to distinguish it, it seemed like he was singing a song in French. The girl next to us was chattering and taking photos, and my cousin excitedly tugged at my arm. "Cousin, this is the lead singer of the band our school formed by itself. He's so handsome, he could debut right on the spot." "He really is handsome," I nodded, feeling a surge of interest in my heart. So that day after he finished singing, when the girls next to him went up to ask for his WeChat, I also handed my phone over amidst my cousin's astonished expression. The next events unfolded naturally. Colin asked in his social circle where there were good recording studios, and I recommended my friend's studio to him. To show his gratitude, he treated me to a meal. Later, I helped him a few more times, and gradually we ended up together. Colin doesn't like living in the dorms, so I accompanied him to move out. He doesn't like takeout, so I learned to cook 3 meals a day for him. He doesn't like having strangers in the house, so I quit the cleaning job and took care of all the household chores. You could say that over the past few years, I have taken care of him in every possible way. My cousin went from gritting her teeth at the beginning to having a complex expression later on. She reminded me, "Cousin, Colin seems to be quite the player. I heard he changes girlfriends more than a dozen times a year, so be careful not to get caught up in it." I was with Colin for 3 years, from his sophomore to senior year. My cousin was very surprised, saying that he settled down for me. "The playboy has changed his ways." I smiled, but deep down I knew he didn't. In the years we'd been together, the new girls Colin added to his phone never stopped. The freshman girl who just enrolled, the senior who formed a band with him, the campus beauty from another school, his flirtatious nature seems to have never been restrained. The first time I discovered it, I was actually angry too. Colin knelt on the ground, holding me and swearing that he would never do it again, saying he loved me, begging me not to leave him. But soon, I discovered his hotel records with the female bassist of the band again. So it was the same apology and forgiveness. Until later, Colin seemed certain that I would not leave him, gradually becoming fearless. He would laugh nonchalantly when I caught him. "Sister, after all, I'm still young, it's understandable that I like to have fun, right? Why don't you wait for me? When I reach your age, maybe I'll settle down." I once saw his friend ask him in the group, "Aren't you afraid your girlfriend will get mad while you're out having fun?" He replied, "It's impossible, she is completely devoted to me and can't live without me." I pulled my hand out of Colin's and turned over to lie flat. Actually, I understand his thoughts. After all, for these 3 years, I have indeed acted as if I really liked him. But he misunderstood. The reason I'm not breaking up is not because I can't live without him, but simply because I feel it's unnecessary. Although Colin likes to play, he also pays attention to safety. Where can I find such a handsome, young, and physically fit brother like him? I'm 29 this year, and I've been an executive assistant for 3 years. The work pressure is so high that I have to find a way to vent a little. Going out to find something is too troublesome, and the quality is uneven. A man in his 20s is my best choice. I can relieve stress with him without any burdens for a long time. The old man may have money but doesn't necessarily spend it on me, but my brother truly puts his energy into me. I enjoyed his body and youth, so naturally I had to give something in return, whether it was money or care in life. This is just a fair exchange, and I never felt like I was at a loss. As for his flirtatiousness, I don't really care. After all, I don't want to marry him, just having some fun is enough. When it comes to real marriage, I still need to find someone reliable. Although my younger brother is strong, he doesn't just use his strength on me, he uses it on others as well. I glanced at the calendar. There are 2 months left until my 30th birthday. By then, I should settle down with a proper man. I looked at Colin with a hint of regret. He seemed to be too hot and impatiently tossed the blanket aside, revealing the smooth, toned muscles of his side, reminding me of their powerful flex when in action. Such a useful younger brother, and I won't be able to use him anymore. When I saw that girl at home, I was taken aback, thinking I hadn't woken up yet. She still had that golden hair, tied up in a bun at the back of her head, wearing a loose long sweater on her upper body, making it impossible to tell if she was wearing pants, and on her feet were a pair of khaki-studded boots in a rugged style. I was stunned, and Colin naturally introduced me. "Sister, this is my cousin, she's come to stay with me for a few days." The girl looked me up and down and reluctantly extended her hand. "Vivian." At this moment, I almost burst out laughing. I finally understood that saying, that people really do laugh when they are at a loss for words. Colin must think I'm such a fool to come up with such a clumsy and half-hearted excuse, actually bringing his affair partner to our house. At the same time, I feel a bit envious of the young people's ability to act on their feelings so impulsively. It's clear that after being together for just 10 days, the girl can't let go and has come after Colin with something in tow. Truly, they are young. People like us, working ourselves to the bone every day, have no time to wander the world for love, do we? Perhaps things had reached such an absurd level that I couldn't even get angry anymore. I wanted to see what else Colin could do that was beyond my understanding. That night at dinner, Vivian sat next to Colin looking at me, and suddenly propped her chin up and said, "Ava, how many years older are you than Colin?" I thought for a moment. 7 years. So much bigger, huh? She widened her eyes, seemingly curious. "They say there's a generation gap every 3 years, so isn't there a generation gap between you two?" I replied lightly, "Not really." "Then at your age, would his family agree?" She said this while covering her mouth and laughing. "I didn't mean to imply that you're old, so don't take it the wrong way. I secretly laughed. The provocation from the young girl didn't make me angry, it only seemed ridiculous to me. I put down my chopsticks and looked at her with a half-smile. Yeah, I also think the age difference between us is too big, but he just likes me. What can I do? I'm quite troubled by it too. Vivian's smile faded. I think it's more appropriate for people of the same age to be together. It's fine now, but when he's 30 and at his best, you'll be almost 40. When you two go out, people might think you're his mother. You don't need to worry about this. I put a piece of meat into her bowl and smiled, saying, you should think more about yourself. You don't have a job or a boyfriend right now, and you can't keep borrowing from your cousin's house in the future. But who knows, maybe you have many cousins, and you could rotate staying with them. Vivian's face was so dark it seemed like water could drip from it. Colin quickly tried to smooth things over, taking my bowl. Sister, do you want another bowl of rice? I put down my bowl. No, I'm full. You all take your time eating. I have a light sleep, and even though Colin got up quietly in the middle of the night, he still woke me up. I listened quietly as his footsteps quietly moved to the door, then he opened the door and went out. A few minutes later, faint sounds of water came from the bathroom. I sighed and sat up. I do quite like Colin and want to spend a few more days with him. After all, enjoying the body of a young brother for one more day is worth it. But now that it has come to this, I really can't endure it any longer. It doesn't matter how he plays by himself, but bringing a woman back affects my life. I don't want to come home exhausted from work every day and engage in meaningless banter with some young girl. I am no longer a 17 or 18-year-old girl, I have already passed the age of fighting over men. I walked to the bathroom door and saw two overlapping figures through the crack. Vivian's breathing became heavier. Aren't you worried that old woman will find out? What if she gets angry and breaks up with you? Colin still laughed heartlessly, kissing as the sound of water drowned out his words. Don't worry, she can't live without me. Vivian was a bit unhappy. What do you like about this old woman? You like how she treats me well. Colin should have said, she takes care of me just like my mom does. I feel comfortable with her. Then why are you cheating? Don't you care if she gets hurt? I've invested my youth too. I listened expressionlessly from behind the door. The night always makes one a bit emo. Clearly, I had prepared myself mentally, but at this moment, I realize I'm not as indifferent as I imagined. After all, we've been together for 3 years, and even raising a dog would create feelings. What a pity. Colin grabbed her waist and bit her shoulder, chuckling. Let's not talk about these boring things anymore. Stay a few more days, I feel like this is more exciting. I didn't listen any longer and went back to the room to start packing my luggage. I have my own house. When I first came to Colin's place to live with him, it was just to take better care of him. In fact, over the past 6 months, I have intentionally or unintentionally started bringing important things home. The rest is not important and doesn't need to be taken away. I took one last glance at the blue and white couple's pajamas hanging on the balcony, the pile of cartoon mugs on the table, and the large and small plush slippers on the floor. Then I quietly closed the door and left. When I opened my eyes at 5 in the morning, I couldn't help but mock myself. After all, I'm getting older. Once you pass 25, your condition deteriorates day by day, and you can no longer fall asleep as easily as you did when you were young. Colin discovered my departure and called me several times. I only replied with 2 words, break up. He probably knew that I had discovered it, and he didn't try to argue anymore, nor did he come looking for me. Perhaps he thought that I was just throwing a tantrum and would forgive him like I did before after a few days. The benefit of being an adult is that even after a breakup, there isn't much time for sadness, because the next day I still have to accompany my boss to discuss a business trip and project. When I arrived at the airport, I saw a figure in a black suit standing upright from a distance. In the bustling crowd, where people hurried by with weary expressions, he seemed to create a space that could be directly captured as a poster, drawing everyone's attention with just his silhouette. I quickened my pace and handed over the black coffee. Alan. The man turned his head, and beneath his fair and handsome forehead was a face that could debut on the spot. Behind the golden-rimmed glasses were a pair of indifferent eyes. He nodded slightly as he took the coffee, standing straight against a nearby pillar. From the first time I saw Alan, I noticed that he stands against the wall for 30 minutes every day without fail. He says this is the way to have a straight posture. Yes, my boss is a handsome man who is very self-aware and has high standards for image management. He knows he looks good and is dedicated to maintaining that good looks. He is the kind of tough guy who wakes up at 5 in the morning to drink black coffee and work out to ensure he has an 8-pack. Every time I look at him, I feel deeply drawn in. Thinking about how I was still lying in bed at 5 in the morning, contemplating breaking up with my brother, my boss, who earned more than 10 times my salary, had already started practicing. No wonder he became the president before turning 30, his success is well-deserved. I admired that handsome face, feeling that the melancholy of heartbreak had dissipated significantly. Thanks to him, just seeing this face every day makes going to work not so annoying. Unfortunately, just as I got off the plane, I happened to run into some celebrity I didn't recognize, surrounded by a crowd of people there to greet them. I was jostled around and couldn't stand steady, and just as I was about to fall, a faint scent of ebony and agarwood enveloped me from behind. I leaned against that person's chest and turned back to see Alan steadying me, saying softly, "Be careful." He stayed behind me, using his arm to keep the crowd at bay. It wasn't until he called me as we were getting on the bus that I snapped back to reality, my gaze unable to help but scan back and forth over the chest I had just leaned against. It is said that a black turtleneck sweater is a man's sexy underwear. No wonder the man who wakes up early every day to work out has his pectoral muscles outlined by the thin black knitted wool sweater, which is simply a glaring temptation. Alan saw me staring at the clothes and thought I was cold, so he gentlemanly took off his suit jacket and handed it to me. "Put it on." I sat in the car draped in his coat, watching Alan, who was looking at the hotel gym information, his jawline clearer than my life plan. He noticed my gaze, tilted his head, and naturally opened a bottle of mineral water in the car, handing it to me. "What's wrong, motion sickness?" I shook my head, my thoughts couldn't help but become lively. At first, I actually planned to treat Alan as my target, but Alan really dislikes office romances. I once heard a female colleague confess her feelings to him. He stood straight against the wall, holding a cup of Americano, with a serious expression, "Don't like me. I don't accept office romances. Office romances will only hinder my work." I watched my crying female colleague run away, swallowed hard, and suppressed all the thoughts in my heart. Just then, Colin appeared out of nowhere, so I just went along with him. Now that I've broken up with Colin, I want to find a quality man to marry. Why look far when a quality man is right beside me? But I can't take the initiative to confess. Being rejected would not only be embarrassing, but I might also lose the position of assistant to the president with $1 million annual salary that I worked so hard to achieve. I need to come up with a plan. After he put it on, I naturally leaned in and adjusted his collar a bit. It was crooked here. He was taken aback, and I subtly shook my hand, letting the faint scent of lychee rose perfume from my wrist waft out. At the end of March, spring was still a bit chilly, people around were wrapped in coats, and couples laughed and playfully embraced each other. Our gazes crossed in the dimness of the flickering traffic, and I realized that after spending so much time together, I had never observed Alan from such a close distance. His eyelashes were very long, almost resembling false eyelashes, and at that moment, they were tousled by the wind, the tips sharply reflecting the yellow glow of the streetlights. A cold wind blew by, and the warm ebony and agarwood seemed to turn icy. I lowered my gaze to avoid his eyes and stepped back to create distance. "All right." Half a second later, Alan finally reacted, suddenly stepping back, as if nothing had happened, calmly turning to leave. But the footsteps grew faster. The tips of her ears slowly turned crimson. I took out my phone behind him and opened the notes. Unintentionally creating intimate physical contact. When Colin called, I was browsing through Alan's moments. He is not the type to post on social media once every 3 years, he almost posts every 2 or 3 days, saying things like he worked out his legs today, trained his back tomorrow, went to a concert the day after, and had a pretty good bottle of wine the day after that. In short, he is completely different from that elite, ascetic face, being quite the chatterbox. I hadn't paid much attention before, but now that I want to win him over, I must know both myself and my opponent to ensure victory in every battle. Just as I was watching intently, a new moment suddenly refreshed at the top of the feed. Alan just posted. Craving lychees. Before I could react, I was already laughing, thinking about whether to give him a thumbs up, when my phone suddenly rang. It's Colin. I instinctively frowned. Ever since we talked about breaking up, Colin hasn't contacted me again. I thought we both tacitly agreed to part on good terms. I picked up the phone, and Colin's voice was faint. Where did I put my sweatshirt? I can't find it. Which one? The dark green one with the embroidery. I thought for a moment. That sweatshirt seemed to be what Colin wore when we first met. His skin was fair, and the dark green made his features appear even more delicate. His strong brow softened his elegance, and his long, pale fingers had a hint of pink at the joints. That was the first moment I felt my heart flutter for him. Haven't you not worn that outfit for a long time? Why did you suddenly think of it again? You don't worry about it. Anyway, I can't find it. Come back and help me look for it. I'm a bit impatient now. It was understandable when I was playing the role of a mother when we were dating, but now that we've broken up, wanting to treat me like a mother is ridiculous. I'm on a business trip and don't have time. Don't contact me anymore. Hey, wait a minute. I didn't wait for him to finish speaking and just hung up the phone. The little boy's thoughts were clearly written on his face. He simply felt that he was not used to being without me as his nanny, wanting me to come back and revolve around him again, but he was too embarrassed to say it directly because he was the one who made the mistake first. I don't want to apologize and lose face, so I simply found a random excuse to give me a way out. But I don't need a way out anymore. A faint sound of a door closing came from next door. It must be Alan back from the gym. Thinking of the pectoral muscles I worked on today, I happily tossed my phone aside. With a high configuration, who would still want a substitute? While Alan was going through the documents, I rested my head on my hand and watched him. It's true what they say, that men look their best when they are working. Alan looked at me with restraint. Flattering me won't get you a bonus. If you're so free, you might as well hurry up and double-check the materials. If something goes wrong in the meeting this afternoon, don't even think about your year-end bonus. But for the next hour, he maintained the pose I had just praised as handsome, not moving at all. After he sat until his legs went numb and awkwardly hobbled out to salvage his dignity, I leaned over to take a look at the document he had been reading. It had been an hour, and that page still hadn't been turned. The negotiation that afternoon went smoothly. Although Alan is a vain and arrogant person, his professional skills are still reliable. If I remember correctly, he graduated with honors from Stanford and then returned home to take over his family business. His dad originally thought that he was too young and unreliable, that he couldn't be trusted to get things done. But over the years, the company has achieved a 1,300% increase in revenue under his leadership. Overall, he is a versatile and formidable person. After the project was secured, we boarded the flight back. Alan doesn't like to drink, so when the other company's boss came to toast, I instinctively raised my glass to block the drink. He stopped me, pulled me behind him without looking away, and frowned, saying, "Little girl, drink less alcohol, foreign liquor is cold in nature." I didn't know whether to complain or be moved. Alan really didn't let me block drinks for him all night. Although he doesn't like drinking, his unexpected tolerance was surprisingly good. By the end, the other boss had crawled under the table, yet he still stood straight, his expression unchanged, calm and composed. Only his eyes had taken on a rosy hue, like peach blossoms. It was not until he got into the car that he changed from his usual meticulous elite demeanor of buttoning his shirt all the way to the top in the sweltering summer, loosening his tie with a hand, his suit draped over his forearm, as he leaned back against the seat in a rare display of laziness. I glanced over. He had taken off his gold-rimmed glasses and held them in his hand. He closed his eyes, his long eyelashes fluttering slightly, and frowned slightly as he pinched his high nose bridge. It was then that I noticed his fingers were long, with distinct joints, and the back of his hand showed faint blue veins. I don't know why, but this discovery suddenly made me feel a bit warm all over on a cool early spring night. When I got home, I pushed him several times before waking Alan up. I was a bit worried about him, so I planned to take him to his doorstep. As I passed by the greenbelt, a branch reached out and tangled in my hair. I pulled slightly, and instead of pulling my hair out, I ended up pulling off a whole branch of petals. A hand suddenly reached out, gently untangling my hair. What the heck? I'm inwardly complaining about how well off people live in places with such good greenery. It's only a few months in, and they're already blooming. Is it cherry blossoms? A faint voice came from above. It's peach blossoms. I was stunned, slowly raising my head, and collided with Alan's smiling gaze. The fragrance of flowers mixed with the scent of wine, fermenting in the watery night. Strange. I clearly haven't been drinking. Yet I feel as if I'm drunk. I can't remember how many years it has been since I last felt my heart flutter. The heartbeat of an adult is more precious than diamonds. Encountering it is like winning the lottery. It's simply a stroke of great luck. This feeling was a bit strange. I was still a bit absent-minded until I got off the bus and headed home, until someone called out to me. Ava. I turned around and saw Colin standing under a streetlight not far away, his face wearing a smile that seemed neither here nor there, the orange light failing to warm it. Who is that man? He sneered coldly. Just a few days after the breakup, and you found a new lover so quickly? The flutter of my heart was interrupted, and my good mood vanished completely. I frowned. It has nothing to do with you. After saying that he was about to leave, seeing my bad attitude, Colin instead softened, quickly grabbed my hand, and leaned on my shoulder to act cute like before. Sister, I know I was wrong. I won't do it again next time. Can you forgive me just once more? I sighed and looked up. In the Klein blue night, the young boy's hair was blown up by the wind, revealing an expression tinged with a hint of defiance. However, the pair of clear eyes below were looking at me, wet and pitiful. Like a little dog that had run away from home and was finally found again. This is Colin's usual tactic. He is very good at playing the victim, but because he is too good-looking, this clumsy method always makes people unable to help but feel soft-hearted. I won't lie to you anymore. He shook my hand back and forth. Please, forgive me one more time. Even though I knew everything he said was a lie, in that moment, my heart wavered. Colin is good-looking, comes from a wealthy family, is generous to me, and provides various emotional support. Over the years we've been together, he has never missed any holidays or birthdays. He observes what I like in daily life, and the gifts he gives are all expensive and exquisite. Most importantly, he is young and physically fit. To be honest, I haven't felt like I've lost out these years. A young and handsome boy puts in so much effort for me. What's wrong with me taking care of him a bit more? It's an equivalent exchange, and I think it's worth it. But I'm turning 30 soon, and I can't afford to play anymore. I have to grow old someday, and I need someone to support each other with, to help me when I'm sick or in trouble. I can play with him now, but what about when I'm 30? Vivian is right, by the time Colin is 30, I'll be almost 40. Can I still have fun? I slowly and firmly withdrew my hand. Colin's gaze dimmed little by little. Let's part on good terms, Colin. The flattering smile on his face faded, replaced by a mocking grin, and a cold glint flickered in those beautiful puppy eyes. Ava, what kind of person can you find after breaking up with me? He maliciously ran his finger across my collarbone, sending shivers down my spine. After leaving me, can you accept someone else? Can anyone else satisfy you more than I do? I brushed his hand away and said lightly, no need for you to worry. He wanted to say something more, so I reached out to smooth his collar and calmly said, Colin, you probably don't understand me. I will never go back on my word. My interactions with Alan are still the same as before. However, we both secretly sense that something has changed. After 3 years together, we can say that we are the ones who understand each other the most. I know the balance of his membership cards at 6 gyms in the city, and he knows that I only drink coffee with one extra shot of milk and no sugar. For the past 3 years, everything was fine, we treated each other as colleagues. But ever since that night, a viscous thread has begun to flow through the originally clear space. But at the same time, I am still tirelessly going on blind dates. There are many good men. The more choices I have, the greater the chance of success. I can't just hang myself on one tree. After scheduling a meeting time with my blind date, I was trying on clothes in my room. The doorbell suddenly rang. I opened the door and unexpectedly saw Colin at the entrance. Vivian, who was linked to his arm, looked at me with the gaze of a victorious general looking at a defeated foe. I felt restless in my heart, and it couldn't help but show on my face. What now? Colin was still wearing that green hoodie, which I used to love seeing him in. I said it was this very piece of clothing that made me fall for him at first sight. But now, all I feel is disgust. Don't get me wrong, Colin handed me a bag he was holding. You left your things behind, my girlfriend and I came to bring them to you, you can handle it yourself. Yeah, Ava. Vivian wished she could stick to Colin, playfully twirling a strand of his golden hair with a finger and smiling. You're busy with work, right? Yao Yao and I are just about to go watch a movie, so we brought your things over. No need to thank us. I expressionlessly took the bag, opened it, and looked inside. There were my pajamas and slippers, along with some small items like a cup. Once a couple set, now they were all alone and solitary. Colin curled his lips and looked at me. Then we'll be leaving first, sister, goodbye. But he didn't move his feet, as if he was waiting to see my sad expression. The next moment, I casually tossed the garbage bag into the trash can at my feet and said expressionlessly, thank you, it's taken care of. Your social circle seems very vibrant. However, I believe that once a woman gets married, she should settle down at home to support her husband and raise children. I saw that you went to Dubai. How much did that trip cost? 50,000, 100,000. That would be enough for me to live for a year. The financial guy walking beside me spoke confidently, and I see that your friends dress very revealingly, going out in little tank tops. I don't think they're serious people. Of course, I'm not trying to judge them, but I suggest you stop hanging out with them. I stared blankly, starting to recall if I had offended the matchmaker. The financial guy I met today claimed to be a top 2 graduate, earning 500,000 a year. We agreed to meet in the park. I wore high heels and walked 8,000 steps with him, listening to him talk nonsense for an entire afternoon, before I found an excuse to go home. In the end, he insisted on walking me back, continuing to talk nonsense all the way. I was in unbearable pain, just about to speak, when a voice suddenly came from beside me. Ava. I suddenly looked up, and Alan was walking over from not far away, elegantly taking off his custom-made suit worth 120,000 and gentlemanly draping it over me. How could he wear so little on such a cold day? I was stunned. The blind date's gaze swept between the two of us, and his expression turned sour. Ava, this isn't how you go about looking for a better option while you're already in a relationship, is it? You still come out for blind dates? Before I could explain, he stormed off in anger. I sighed and tightened my coat. Alan, what are you doing? Alan's smile faded, and he countered with a question. You took a day off today, just to go on a blind date with someone like this? I am helpless, Alan, the matchmaking market is like this. Good men have long been taken and won't circulate back in. This is already quite good, at least they look like a normal person, and an annual income of 500,000 is not bad either. 500,000? He scoffed, that's not even enough to buy me a watch. I seize every opportunity to flatter, not everyone can be like you. If I could meet someone like you, would I still need to be here for blind dates? He stared straight into my eyes and suddenly asked, Ava, what is your ideal type? I thought for a moment and replied, well, someone over 1.8 meters tall. Alan straightened his back. I like good-looking people. If they're not handsome, at least they should be pleasing to the eye. He straightened up a bit more. One should have a good personality, be emotionally stable, have a sense of responsibility, and, well, should not have any bad habits, and must be ambitious and career-oriented. I said a word, and he straightened up a bit. By the end, his eyes completely lit up as he tentatively took my hand. Actually, His words were not finished. Suddenly, his car next to him lunged forward, and a huge crash sounded. Bang. I was startled to see a red Ferrari crash hard into the back of Alan's Bentley Continental. Through the glass, I could see Colin's furious eyes from inside the Ferrari. He slammed the door and got out of the car, his eyes cold as if tempered with ice, yet also ignited with a raging fire. "Are you with him now?" I was still in shock, and when I came to my senses, I couldn't contain my anger and slapped Colin, saying, "Are you crazy?" With a slap, he turned his face away, his tongue brushing against his cheek, and he casually turned back to smile. "Sister, have you had enough? If not, I can give you more over here." I took a step back. "You really are a madman." "I am crazy." He chuckled lightly. "Even if I killed him, it would be impossible for you to be together. We have broken up." I didn't expect him to be as difficult as a stubborn plaster. Looking again at that almost wrecked black Bentley, I despaired and said, "You already have a girlfriend, so why are you still bothering me? You played with me for so many years, and my best youth has been taken away by you. Now that you're tired of playing, you want to kick me away and leave whenever you want." Colin raised an eyebrow, tearing off the facade of obedience, the rebelliousness in his brows no longer concealed. "Stop joking, Colin." I suppressed my anger. "What right do you have to control me when you're entangled with other women every day?" "I already said I won't do it again." Colin gritted his teeth, his eyes filled with an unknown mix of unwillingness and pleading. "You have forgiven me so many times before, why can't you give me another chance this time?" I thought Alan would leave, because he hates it when others waste his time. This should be the time when he is sweating it out at the gym. But he had been watching from the side, and suddenly spoke up. "Ava, I used to think you had good taste, but now I suddenly realize that your judgment is quite poor." "We're fucking talking, what does it have to do with you?" Colin said angrily. Alan smiled indifferently, glanced at him, then withdrew his gaze, and said nothing more. It was a very contemptuous look, like an adult man looking at a child who had not yet grown any hair. Colin's face darkened as he was about to step forward, and I quickly stopped him, warning, "Colin, don't embarrass yourself. There's no possibility between us anymore. If you keep bothering me, it's just a waste of time. I don't want to see you again." Colin widened his eyes, looking at me with a hint of hurt, as if he hadn't expected me to say that. After a while, he coldly threw down a sentence, "Ava, I won't let this go so easily." Then he turned and left. Behind him, Alan shouted, "After the insurance assessment, I will send you the bill, don't forget to pay me." The originally enchanting evening was completely ruined. I had no mood to flirt with Alan anymore. His expression was a bit unpleasant when he left. That night, for the first time ever, he didn't go to the gym but opened a bottle of whiskey at home to drink, and even remembered to post on social media. The next day, he didn't speak to me at all. I was exhausted both physically and mentally by Colin and planned to go home, have a drink, and rest early. But as soon as I reached the elevator, I was stunned. Colin came over from somewhere and stepped into the elevator first. I frowned. "Why are you here again?" "I'm here to find my friend, not to look for you." "Are you the only one who can stay here?" Colin pouted. I was too lazy to get entangled with him, I just wanted to hurry home. After pressing the floor button, I leaned against the side and closed my eyes to rest. Who knows that just as the elevator had risen a few floors, it suddenly stopped with a loud rumble. The lights went out with a whoosh, and everything around was pitch black. I was blinded, reaching out to press the call button, but there was no response. The elevator was eerily silent. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. My breathing quickened, my heart raced wildly, and sweat poured down my back. When I was a child, I was abducted. My parents used all the connections they could find locally to search for me, and the traffickers had no choice but to hide me in a suitcase, planning to take me away. That day I was locked in a suitcase, my mouth sealed with tape, unable to make a sound, completely losing track of time, until I became dizzy and lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was already in the hospital. My mom was holding me and crying. It was then that I realized I had almost suffocated to death in a suitcase. The doctor said if they had found me half an hour later, I might not have been saved. After that, I began to fear being in closed, dark environments. For these years, I have been careful to avoid them, and my claustrophobia has not flared up for several years now. But now the suddenly dark and enclosed environment reminds me of the fear from those years. I gasp for breath, yet feel as if I can't catch my breath no matter what, my body uncontrollably sliding down. Colin pulled me up and held me in his arms, the faint scent of citrus on him dispelling some of the suffocation. I almost desperately buried myself in his embrace, drawing in the warmth from his body. "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid." He gently patted my back and held me tight, reassuring me, "I'm here, don't be afraid." I clutched his clothes tightly, unable to speak, cold sweat and tears mingling together, soaking his chest. In the midst of confusion, Colin became my only savior. He whispered softly in my ear, "Sister, let's make up. What will you do if you encounter this situation alone in the future? I promise I won't contact other women anymore. Let's be good together, okay?" His soft whispers were like a kind of enchantment, and I instinctively wanted to agree in fear, but suddenly a faint thought emerged in my mind. How could this be so coincidental? How could Colin suddenly arrive, and the two of us get stuck in the same elevator when it breaks down? Before I could figure out this question, the elevator suddenly started moving. The lights came back on, illuminating every detail of the smile on Colin's face. I was stunned, and the next moment, a narrow gap was pried open in the elevator door. After a sharp sound like nails on a blackboard, the elevator door opened. Alan rolled up the sleeves of his shirt to his forearms and, with a blank expression, walked in and punched Colin in the face. "You beast." Before I had the chance to be surprised by hearing him curse for the first time, I fainted in a state of extreme fear and exhaustion. In the second before my consciousness faded, I caught a faint whiff of reassuring ebony incense at the tip of my nose. The nasal cavity woke up earlier than the brain to the smell of disinfectant. I opened my eyes and saw Alan sitting by the bed. He sat upright and properly, handling official business with a notebook in hand. The small chair in the hospital felt as if it were a genuine leather seat from an office. "Awake?" I weakly replied, "Yes." Was it Colin who had someone do the elevator? Alan said indifferently, "Yeah, your ex-boyfriend is quite powerful, bribing the property management to stop the elevator for an hour, just to let you have a taste of his leftovers." I fell silent. Claustrophobia was something Colin learned about me not long after we got together. At that time it was the same. When the elevator malfunctioned, I was terrified, and he held me tightly, saying with great concern that he would always be there for me, so I didn't have to be afraid. He knew very well how scared and pained I would be. Yet he still deliberately scared me, just to make me agree to get back together with him. Does Colin's unwillingness to let go mean he loves me that much? I don't think so. He is probably more of a lingering unwillingness after being chased by others, only to suddenly be cast aside. And a reluctance to lose my meticulous care for him. I cursed inwardly. Having spent all day hunting geese, I was finally pecked in the eye by one. I used to think my younger brother was young and cute, easy to play with, but now I realize how frightening he can be when he becomes obsessive. Alan was beside me, crunching away at an apple, and I realized that the versatile Alan also had things he wasn't good at. For example, he couldn't peel an apple. A seemingly expensive imported apple was left with a pockmarked surface after he was done. "Ava, I used to think you were great, both excellent and beautiful, and very tasteful. But now I have discovered a flaw in you." My heart raced, and I thought he was so angry that his Bentley had been wrecked that he was going to fire me. Just as I was about to explain, he continued, "Your taste in men is really terrible. Are you blind to be with someone like that?" I couldn't explain to him that I was only coveting my younger brother's body, so I lowered my head and fell silent. A few seconds later, the sound of peeling the apple stopped. A half-eaten apple was handed over, and Alan, with a hint of annoyance and helplessness, said, "Go ahead and eat." The doctor said that my fainting was caused by excessive emotional fluctuations, and after observing me for a day in the hospital, they let me go. When I went out, I saw Colin leaning against the wall. He had dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his chin that had grown overnight, and his eyes were heavily bloodshot. It seems he hasn't slept all night, keeping watch here. But perhaps feeling guilty, he didn't dare to enter the ward. When he saw me, his expression changed, and he wanted to speak but didn't. At this point, I have nothing more to say. Blame and insults are meaningless now. I just want him to completely disappear from my life, never to be seen again. I walked past him without glancing sideways, and behind me came his muted voice. I'm sorry, sister. I continued to walk forward, his voice choked with a roughness. I just want you to come back, I don't want you to leave me. I regret it, sister, I really love you. I said nothing and didn't look back. In fact, I had thought about being good with Colin. A person's heart is not made of iron. After being together for 3 years, there were nights when I woke up from nightmares, only to find him holding my hand tightly. In that moment, I fleetingly thought about wanting to spend the rest of my life with him. But his actions dispelled my delusions. As I stand here today, I have no regrets. I will never look back again. Alan gave me a half-month vacation to rest well. But I only have 5 days of vacation, so I secretly asked him if this would be against the rules. He looked at me for a while and said, "The company is mine, and what I say is the rule." I took a good break, and after returning, I repaid him a favor. When I saw Alan, I flattered him and brought him a cup of coffee. As a result, the flattery landed on the horse's leg. Just as I brought it over, he turned around, and a whole cup of coffee spilled all over his expensive suit. I didn't have time to think about my fate, I hurriedly grabbed a tissue to wipe him. After wiping for a while, I noticed something was off. Alan's face had turned an alarming shade of red, and I realized the position where the coffee had spilled was a bit delicate. I raised my hand, not daring to move. Alan breathed heavily, looking up at me with gritted teeth. "Ava, is this how you repay kindness? What if I get burned?" His words came to an abrupt halt. I lowered my head and looked at him, his eyelids flushed pink with excitement. The distance between us was probably only about 20 centimeters, and I could even feel each other's breath. The familiar woody fragrance floated up, intertwining more tightly with the scent of roses from my perfume. Even though he had stopped moving, Alan's face grew redder and redder. I suddenly spoke up, "Alan, are you still not getting involved in office romances?" He opened his mouth, stuttering like never before. After a long time, disappointment slowly surfaced in my eyes, and I pretended to act natural as I stood up. I didn't say anything, it was my impulsiveness. Then I turned to leave, but was grabbed by the wrist. I turned around, and Alan was looking to the side, his face as red as an apple, quietly saying, "Okay?" I pretended not to hear. "What did you say?" "I didn't catch that." He closed his eyes and said recklessly, "I said we can do it, so let's do it now." When Vivian came to find me, I was picking out clothes for my date with Alan. She knocked on the door loudly, and after I opened it, she pointed at me excitedly. "Did you seduce Colin? You two have clearly broken up, why are you still entangling with him?" I was completely confused. "Are you sick? When did I ever entangle with him?" "You didn't entangle him, so why is he ignoring me now? He doesn't answer my calls or reply to my messages." Vivian's eyes turned red with anger. "You old woman, is it that no one wants you except for him, that's why you're so shameless?" She actually reached out to slap me, but I caught her wrist with my other hand, and in her incredulous gaze, I slapped her face, smack. Vivian was slapped by me and turned her head away, still wanting to rush up and fight me. I rolled up my sleeves and said slowly, "You may not know, but I am a black belt in Taekwondo." She suddenly became timid, but couldn't help but curse. "Are you really willing to be the other woman? You two are just not suited for each other, and his family won't accept you. Can you just let him go?" First. I looked at Vivian. "I have never entangled with him, it has always been him entangling with me." Instead of coming to me to throw a tantrum, why not ask him why he ignores you? Maybe he just doesn't like you at all. In the end, I said slowly, you are the third party who has intruded between us. I have evidence of your interference throughout the whole process. If you want to make a scene, I don't mind sending it out. Now I want to rest. I said lightly, I have no habit of cherishing beauty. If you disturb me again, I'll beat you so badly that even your mother won't recognize you. Vivian glared at me resentfully, only those who are unloved are the mistress, he doesn't love you at all. I send the same words to you. I smiled and shut the door with a bang, good night. After bringing Ellen home, I posted a family photo on my social media. In the photo, my mom is smiling at Alan, her eyes brimming with satisfaction for this son-in-law. This happiness lasted until I got home, and then I found Colin, reeking of alcohol, at the door. He lifted his head, his expression resembling that of a small dog, discarded by its owner. If he had dog ears, they would surely be drooping down. Since the last time I was discharged from the hospital, he hasn't contacted me again. I thought I had finally gotten rid of him. I didn't expect him to come back. He didn't know if it was because of the drinking or the crying, but his eyes were red, looking pitiful. He is really good looking, and even though we have broken up, I can't say anything unpleasant when I look at this face. I can only wearily ask, what's wrong with you again? He opened his mouth, his voice hoarse, did you take him home? I nodded. He lowered his head, we've been together for so many years, and you've never taken me to meet your family. This is true, because I never felt that Colin and I would have any outcome, so I never thought about bringing him home. But he also never mentioned bringing me home. At that time, when I spoke to you, would you want to go home with me? I couldn't help but curl my lips in a mocking smile, finding his question truly ridiculous. I thought about it now. I don't want him to enter the house, but he is blocking the door and won't let me in, so I can only sit next to him. Colin hung his head, his voice choked with emotion, Sister, I feel so miserable. I returned home alone, and the house was empty. So many traces of your life remain, the coffee machine was bought by you, the flowers on the balcony were cared for by you, the bedding set on the bed was chosen by you. But now the coffee machine is unused, covered in dust, the flowers on the balcony have withered from lack of water, the bedding set is cold and lifeless, with only me lying on it. The scent you left behind is fading more and more, I can't forget you no matter what, I really don't know what to do anymore. He got up and knelt in front of me, obediently resting his face on my knee, and I felt a warm dampness on my leg. He pleaded softly, Sister, I know I was wrong, please don't be so cruel to me. Don't abandon me, I beg you. I patted his back and said gently, it's too late, Colin. What should I do then? His eyes turned red. You tell me, what should I do? That's your own business now. I got up, one cannot want both, Colin. When you betrayed me, you had already made your choice. From beginning to end, the one who gave up on this relationship was not me, but you. As I turned away, in the moment the door closed, his tear-streaked face was cut off from the outside. After a long time, the sound of the engine roaring finally came from downstairs. I leaned out of the window to take a look. That red Ferrari was no longer drivable, so he switched to a black Lamborghini. I thought for a moment, took out my phone, and dialed 911. Hello, is this traffic control? I want to report someone for drunk driving. When Colin was detained, Alan and I had already booked our tickets to go abroad. I wanted to see the aurora, and he wanted to soak in hot springs. We hit it off and decided to go to Iceland. Before going in, Colin sent me one last message. Sister, you are really heartless. I won't let go. I was blocking this number while asking Alan, is the luggage ready? Have you checked my luggage? Alan swore solemnly, I guarantee there will be no problem. I nodded, but couldn't help worrying, is it really okay for us to go out like this? Our colleagues will gossip about us taking a vacation together. Let them talk. He didn't think much of it, anyway, they would know when it came time to get married. But our company doesn't allow office romances, right? I reminded him, you just said that at the conference last year. Alan held out his phone in front of me. The company's latest rules and regulations, you didn't read them carefully, did you? He smiled, now it's fine.